How is everybody doing? It is your main man Maniac, and in this video I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on what if Mr Miyagi was still alive in Cobra Kai Season 4. Let's hop into it. So a quick disclaimer is that I'm going to actually be assuming that Mr Miyagi was not in Season 1, 2 or 3 and that he was believed to be dead by pretty much everyone who knew about him in the Cobra Kai series. However, he would then emerge from the shadows just like Kreese did, and everyone would think he was dead just like they did with Kreese. So the first question is, when would he come back? Would it be the beginning of the season? Would it be right at the end, just like Chosen coming back after they lost the tournament to Cobra Kai? Or would it be somewhere in the middle? I think the perfect episode for Mr Miyagi to return would be episode 8, Party Time. And it's not because he's going to be at the prom, but the scene where Johnny returns to the original Cobra Kai dojo when Terry Silver and Kreese are there, and Terry Silver beats him up and kicks him by surprise, and then proceeds to beat him up despite Johnny's attempt to fight him off. I think that at the point where Terry Silver says to Kreese, "Do you want to see some more?" and then proceeds to beat Johnny up despite Johnny's attempts to fight him off, Mr Miyagi would then come to Johnny's rescue. This would catch Silver completely off guard, and there'd be a flashback to the Karate Kid Part 3 when Mr Miyagi managed to fight off Terry Silver, John Kreese, and he also rescued Daniel from being beaten up by Mike Barnes. A one-on-one fight would take place between Mr Miyagi and Terry Silver, and Johnny would watch and try to join in, but Mr Miyagi would encourage him not to. Terry Silver would use different moves to what he did in the Karate Kid Part 3, since he would have learned from that fight even though it took place all those years ago. It would even seem like Silver had gained the upper hand on Mr Miyagi and was about to finish him off, but at the last second, when he's about to land the final blow, Mr Miyagi dodges it and then counterattacks him, and then he completely ends up being destroyed. I believe there were planks of wood in the old dojo and they would all be smashed and broken, and then there'd be a flashback of Terry Silver being beaten by Mr Miyagi, and he'd be beaten up badly, and that would be just before the tournament. Johnny would have only received that kick to the head and have been slightly concussed, but he would be okay and be able to get up and recover from that relatively quickly. After the fight, Mr Miyagi would take Johnny home, and he would end up being in his apartment talking with Mr Miyagi as they drank tea or just ate snacks, or Mr Miyagi might even try to put an ice pack on Johnny's head. Then, instead of Miguel coming over and asking Johnny about girl problems after prom, Daniel would actually come over. This would probably be to try and smooth things over since they fell out with each other and their dojo split. Daniel would knock on the door of Johnny's apartment and Mr Miyagi would open it, and this would completely take Daniel off guard because he would just have thought that Mr Miyagi was dead, and he'd have flashbacks of the time he spent with Mr Miyagi. He'd probably get emotional and tear up, and then he'd hug Mr Miyagi. Johnny and Daniel would then make up and agree that their dojos would be back together as one. Daniel would ask Mr Miyagi why he was gone all this time. Daniel would say that he thought Mr Miyagi was dead, but also there would be no Mr Miyagi's grave in this version of events because there would be no one to bury. It would just be that he went missing and people assumed that he died. Mr Miyagi would reply with words of wisdom, explaining in a plant-based riddle about why he was gone and how he was actually still alive this whole time. Daniel and Johnny would then explain that Terry Silver was back and that Kreese was back, and he would say he already knows this and he actually saved Johnny, and then they would both ask him if he could help them to prepare for and win the tournament. It's important to remember that at this point in the season, the tournament would be days away. So that means Mr Miyagi wouldn't be able to do an intense, long training of the students to get them ready for the tournament. Instead, he would just show them a few moves and also mentally prepare them with wisdom to stop them being caught off balance by the Cobra Kai students taunting and tormenting them. This would be especially important for Eli, whose confidence was crushed after his mohawk was cut off by the Cobra Kai students. Eli would hear words of wisdom and encouragement from Mr Miyagi, which would enable him to get his confidence back and fight well in the tournament, instead of Moon just kissing him before the fight with Kyla. And that brings us on to the tournament. In the few days that the students had with Mr Miyagi, I don't think their performance would be significantly improved because it's just a few days and they wouldn't have had time to perfect any of the techniques. I think the words of wisdom would help them approach the tournament in a different way, and Eli maybe wouldn't have lost the point in the preliminary rounds, but I still don't see characters like Bert getting through the preliminary rounds and making the quarter or semi-finals. I'll just assume that the same fighters make it to the quarterfinals, and it kind of goes the same way with the draws, with Robbie getting to the semi-finals, Dimitri, and then obviously Eli and Miguel. Let's assume that Miguel still gets injured in the fight between himself and Eli, and that instead of the medic just saying that it was kind of a pulled muscle and that he was fine, and then Miguel trying not to even fight because he didn't feel like he was doing it for him anymore, Mr Miyagi's healing powers would make him feel better, and he would be able to fight, and Mr Miyagi would encourage him to fight, and then him and Eli would both fight, and it could go either way, to be honest. Eli could win, Miguel could win, so one of them would go to the final, fight Robbie and beat Robbie. In the girls' final between Sam and Tori, even if Tori won and beat Sam because of the ref being paid off by Terry Silver, because Miyagi-Do and Eagle Fang could have actually clubbed together as one big dojo, we'll say it was just called Miyagi-Do and Eagle Fang, then they would have probably accumulated enough points from the skills competition and from the other fights to still win the Grand Champion trophy. This would mean that Kreese lost the bet and would have to leave the valley, but since Daniel and Johnny went back on their word in season 5, I'm going to assume that Kreese would do the same, and him and Terry Silver at the end, in a similar way to how Daniel asked for Chosen's help, they would enlist the help of Kim Dae-un and all of the best fighters from Dojang, and they would then try to take down Eagle Fang and Miyagi-Do in season 5. I think the season would end like this, and we wouldn't even know who Kim Dae-un was, and then in season 5, it would all be revealed, and everything about the Sekai Tekai would also be revealed. And there you have it. That's what I think would happen if Mr Miyagi was still alive in season 4 of Cobra Kai. Did you agree with me, or do you think it would have gone a different way? Let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and remember to stay amazing. Bye.